it, but Jean Shafaroff joins us now. She's a board member for the New York City Mission Society. And Jean, thank you for joining us today. You guys, do everything you can to make sure that food pantries and homeless people and people that need it the most are getting at least something every day. And that seems to be really taxed right now. What can you tell us about what's happening?
Well, right now, the food pantries are in great need. And what's going on now is we have all this unemployment. We have 17 million people in the United States right now out of work. And so what does this mean? Well, most people live paycheck to paycheck. And so people don't have food on the table. And what could be worse than having a family and no food on the table? And so the food banks are the first place that people go to get food, which makes sense. And unfortunately, the need for food at these food banks is so great right now that the food banks can't supply all the food. And so, for example, a group called Feeding America, which is the largest food bank in the United States, just to give you an example, in Omaha last week, at one of their banks where they give out normally under 100 meals, they had 800 people lining up. And so they just didn't have the food. But what we're seeing is that people are stepping to the plate, but we are in what I would call crises situation. Donations have to come into these food pantries. And if you want me to tell you how your listeners and watchers can donate, the best thing to do if you can is write a check or go on a food pantry's website and donate through PayPal or through a credit card. The second thing you can do is drop off canned food or food that's wrapped and non-perishable, but it can't be home-baked food because the food pantries are concerned about contamination. And so they want to give out clean food, and clean food means canned food or fully wrapped food. And then the third thing you can do is volunteer, because a lot of these pantries have lost their volunteers. Some of these volunteers are older, many of them are in their 70s, and they themselves are at high risk for contracting coronavirus. And so they've decided to stay home. And so anyone who can volunteer, that's great also. Finally, tell your friends to get involved. And if you have neighbors and you can help with them and they need food, give them that food. An act of kindness is so appreciated during this terrible, terrible time.
So, Jean, first let me correct one thing. A little earlier, when I mentioned that people were bringing down homemade peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, I thought it was a complete act of love from the community, because I'm talking about the morning after one of these 100-year storms, and
Right.
the FDA was not there. There were no people there checking on the validity of it. It was the good of people's hearts, and they brought literally peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, which people were looking at like filet mignons at that point. But I do want to stress, if you're out there, go to your favorite food pantry. What's your website, Jean, where you guys give the best ones and the ones that need the most help?
Well, I recommend Feeding America. That is very large. It does a great job. They're all over the United States. And then if you're in the New York area, I recommend the bigger food pantries right now, because they are the ones that can really get the food out there. And they are New York Food Pantry, Food Bank for New York, City Meals. City Meals is a group that goes and delivers meals to the aged. And then there's God's Love We Deliver. I just gave them a store party when I was down in Florida in early March. And what God's Love We Deliver does is they give meals to the home, deliver meals to the homebound. And then finally, there is City Harvest, which is another great food pantry. And New York City Mission, we're more involved with the children. And we, of course, want donations. But if you're really focused on getting the food on the table for most of America. I'd say Feeding America, and then some of the groups that I mentioned in the New York area. I think they're all great. And you have to be careful now of scam operations. There are people, they make fake GoFundMe pages, and then they pretend they're a charity and they go out asking for money. You don't want to give to them.
Got it. All
And
right.
during terrible, terrible time, because really with 17 million people out of work, the need for food is massive. So please, whatever you can donate, it doesn't have to be big. It can be a very small check, $5, $10, $25. Of course, if you can donate thousands and thousands, you must do that. Do what you can, because we are in a terrible situation now. And just put yourself in the position of someone else. How would you like to have a family of 5 sitting around a dinner table and no food for anyone? It's a great tragedy, but I'm confident that we will get through this if we all work together.
Well, Jean, I want to thank you so much for bringing a spotlight on this and creating some awareness. I'm going to ask anybody watching if you can help out the cause. Go to Feeding America. You can check out also New York Food Pantry. You have City Meals and City Harvest are ones that Jean in particular knows are good, honest, reputable places. And beware of scams. I personally, and I'm fortunate, thank God, but I can't imagine sitting around with 5 people and not having enough for a meal because my mother's Italian. And my mother could have 3 people at the table and she cooks for 20. So, you know, it's unfortunately a very tough time, especially for those who are less fortunate. The healthcare crisis is hitting the less fortunate neighborhoods, the lower income neighborhoods, the rural areas where they don't have as much health care. And Jean, you guys are looking out for the kids, thank goodness. And hopefully my audience and others will look out and try to help these organizations. Thanks for bringing it to our attention today.
And thank you. And I'm donating to a food pantry, and I'm doing whatever I can. I'm also looking towards the hospitals as well, because our doctors, nurses, they all need our help right now too. And as a country, we can unite, we can conquer this, but we must open up our wallets, and those that have, I believe, have an obligation to give. And those that right now are strapped for money, think about volunteering, think about acts of kindness towards your neighbors. And if you have 2 jars of peanut butter and you think your neighbor is going hungry, go over and give them that jar of peanut butter.
Well, that's some sage advice. Thank you very much, Jean. We really appreciate it. Jean Shafroff does, her and her organization do amazing things to help kids and families, and bringing the awareness to it is what we try to do here on Liquid Lunch.